Hello my beautiful friends, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Cami, and what I like to do here on YouTube is I like to talk about true crime cases that either no other YouTubers have covered or not that many other YouTubers have covered, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing today. But first, spooky season is in full effect, y'all. So originally what I wanted to do for spooky season is the whole month of October I wanted no skip days, and I wanted to do a whole series where I talk about true crime cases that have had movies based on them. And I do have 2 scripts typed up, so I still am going to make those videos at some point. It's just not going to be during October because I live in Louisiana, if you are unaware. And I live in one of the areas that was affected by Ida, and we had to evacuate, and it was a whole mess. So I don't have the time. So I'm sorry. I'm not going to be doing anything for Halloween. I'm aiming for next year. So that's what's going on. But today, we are going to be talking about a case that requires a trigger warning for domestic violence. And it's a case that makes me very angry because it is a classic example of police not doing their jobs. And if they had done their jobs, this beautiful woman would still be here today. And this is the case of Shana Grice. In the description below, I am going to be leaving links to domestic violence charities. I'm also going to be leaving domestic violence hotlines in case they are necessary. Before we jump in though, let's discuss this problem of domestic violence. There was a study done by Dr. Monckton Smith where she studied 372 killings in the United Kingdom. During her research, she found that almost all of these killings followed a pattern that she referred to as the homicide timeline. The first stage is the pre-relationship history of stalking and abuse. And in fact, this was the one stage that she found that was not always followed. However, she found also that this was usually only not followed whenever the perpetrator had never been in a relationship before. It was the case for George Appleton, who murdered his ex-girlfriend Claire Wood in 2009 by strangling her and setting her on fire. Appleton had a history of violence against women and had been jailed twice, which he told Claire Wood that had been for motoring offenses. This murder actually led to the introduction of Clare's Law in 2014, which was designed to allow potential domestic abuse victims to request information about their partner's past from police. The second stage sees a fast escalation of the relationship, so it quickly develops into something serious. Rosie Derbyshire had only been with Ben Topping for a few weeks, but in that time, her family said that they had seen severe changes in Rosie. Rosie was found dead in the street a month into their relationship. Topping had savagely beaten her to death with a crowbar, and it turns out that he also had a history of violence. Rosie had received warnings about Ben Topping over social media, and she had actually requested information about him via Clare's Law, but information about a partner can take up to 35 days to come through, and she was killed only 11 days after she requested this information. Rosie's family is actually currently campaigning to have the law changed to where it only takes 48 hours for the law. Rosie's family is actually currently campaigning to have the law changed to where it only takes 48 hours for the information to come through rather than 35 days. Next comes the coercive control, which is something that came into the news after Sally Challen was released from prison after killing her husband Richard with a hammer. For 31 years of their marriage, Sally had been the victim of domestic abuse at the hands of her husband Richard, who had systematically abused, humiliated, assaulted, and isolated her from her friends and family. In 2019, Sally was granted a retrial where her sentence was reduced to manslaughter, and she was released for time served, having served over 9 years in prison. The fourth stage is a trigger that threatens the perpetrator's control, which can be anything from financial instability to a breakup. It was the latter that prompted Thomas Griffiths to murder 17-year-old Ellie Gould. Her death came the day after she had broken up with Thomas, saying that she felt suffocated. She told her friends that Thomas didn't take it well, and the following day he had actually left school to confront her at her home. He stabbed her over 13 times with a knife from her own kitchen. Andrew Case, on the other hand, was facing financial instability whenever he murdered his wife and children. He had been ordered to pay back his creditors when he slit the throats of his wife and his children and then hung himself. Stage 5 is escalation, and it's when the perpetrator's control tactics are increased. This could mean that they start threatening suicide or start stalking their exes. Michael Shredwick was described as a jealous man who was threatened by his girlfriend's relationship with her late partner. He claimed she had been trying to stop him from committing suicide when she had been shot in the face and killed. Then there's the change in thinking. The perpetrator starts considering their revenge or even murder. Vernon Holmes was so jealous of his ex-girlfriend Allison Hunt's new relationship that he began plotting her murder. He told his current girlfriend not to try to contact him so that way he wouldn't be traced. Dressed in dark clothes, a cap and gloves, and drove to Hunt's house, parked around the corner, knocked on the door, and when she answered, he stabbed her 18 times on her doorstep. The second to last step is when the perpetrator starts planning his attack. And then the final stage is homicide. A stalking expert, Gary Shawan, explained that on average, a victim experiences between 70 and 100 incidents before reporting to the police. I found that in my lifetime, we've been seeing a lot more cases of domestic violence in the news. And I don't just mean abuse. I mean people murdering their partners. Like, we've had Chris Watts, Addie Hall, Susan Powell, Nancy Benoit, and of course we can't forget OJ. But today's case isn't about any of them. Today's case is about a vivacious young woman who had her entire life ahead of her. A woman who loved to laugh, who reported her abuser 5 times to the police and was never taken seriously. Shana Grice was born in Portslade, which is a district close to Brighton in Sussex, South England. She was the only child born to Sharon and Richard Grice. In 2015, Shana began work as a receptionist for a company called Brighton Fire Alarms, and she was really excited because it was her first real job. I mean, all jobs are real jobs, but it was her first, non-minimum wage paying job, and it allowed her to save up money for her wedding to her longtime boyfriend Ashley Cook. Shana and Ashley had actually been together since secondary school, which if you're not from England, I believe that means grades 7 through 11. At least that's what Google told me. I'm not from England, so I don't know. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. So Ashley was a carpenter, and him and Shana seemed really happy together. While working at this fire alarm company in 2015, Shana actually met a man named Michael Lane, who was a 26-year-old mechanic. And he was from a place called Thornshill Rise, Portslade, and right from the get-go, there was an immediate attraction between Michael and Shana. And Michael thought Shana was just the girl of his dreams, and he right away started making his move on her. He started leaving her gifts. He started leaving her, they said that he started leaving her wealth, so I guess he started leaving her, money. And Shana reciprocated it, so they started this kind of secret relationship, and I want to say right now, no one better come in these comments and say, well, she was cheating on her fiance and blah, 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 because I will shut those comments down very quickly. Just because someone is cheating on someone does not mean they deserve whatever happens to them. Does not mean they deserve abuse. Does not mean they deserve to be murdered. Okay? I want to make that very clear. So don't come in here with that energy. However, from the start, their relationship was not good, and eventually Shana did break it off, which is what led up to this series of events that we are about to talk about. In the months leading up to Shana's murder, she had made several phone calls to the Sussex police about Michael. For 8 months leading up to Shana's murder, Michael spied on her, put a tracker on her car, assaulted her, and broke into her home while she slept. There was one point where after an office party, Michael had showed up at Shana's house, followed her around, and whenever Shana attempted to call the police on him, Michael grabbed her phone, and when she went to go take it back from him, he actually grabbed her by the hair and pulled her around her house by her hair. And as he is pulling her by the hair, he's just hitting her. There was another point where he had vandalized Ashley's car on New Year's by writing, "Happy New Year's, Shana will always cheat on you." At the same time that Michael is doing all of this, though, he's doing pretty much everything he can to try and win Shana back. He's doing things like sending her flowers and just doing all the general love bombing stuff that abusers do. One time when Shana called the police on Michael, she even told them, she was scared of Michael. She told them, and I quote, I really don't know how to start this conversation, but I think I'm being stalked. She also told the cops of the repeat damage of the car, like the slashed tires. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this, but at one point he had slashed her tires, and she had told him that he was hiding outside of her house, and just of all this general unwanted attention that he was giving her. So the cops did an investigation, and despite all this evidence that Shana had against Michael, they pretty much just told him, hey, leave her alone because, yeah, that's gonna do something. So about a month later, the cops got another call about Michael, and this time it was from Ashley's mother to report Michael attacking Shana outside of their home. So cops got there shortly after to find the family comforting Shana, and she was interviewed by the police chief who was named Trevor Godfrey. Now at the time, Shana didn't actually reveal the relationship that she had with Michael, and so Trevor went to interview Michael. When Trevor interviewed Michael admitted to assaulting Shana, but he told Trevor Godfrey that he and Shana had a relationship. He showed them text messages that proved that he and Shana were in a relationship. And here's where I start to get really angry at the police. So because of this, even though, he has just assaulted Shana, and Shana has all this proof of him stalking her, assaulting her, and hurting her, the police Trevor Godfrey decided that since they were in a relationship, him hurting Shana didn't matter, and they weren't gonna arrest him and even fine Shana 90 pounds. So I guess it's totally fine to assault your significant other or whoever you're in a relationship with. It's the fact that they said, well, she's in a relationship with Michael, so clearly it's fine for him to assault her. It's the fact that they are just blatantly ignoring an assault on someone just because they're dating their attacker. It's vile. These police are not doing their job, and the fact that they find Shana is even worse to me. Now, Godfrey did end up facing charges of gross misconduct because of how he handled this situation. And in 2019, he told a committee, quote, "She would be signing her texts with 5 kisses. This is not harassment. It's a smokescreen to hide her affair. There was nothing to me to indicate that she was in any type of danger whatsoever." So I guess Michael admitting that he assaulted Shana isn't enough to make you think that she's in danger. Now, even though he faced this disciplinary committee, they ended up deciding that he had not committed gross misconduct, but that he did end up committing misconduct by not investigating thoroughly. Shana's parents called the hearing a sham, and they said that it was a joke, and honestly, I have to agree. Emma King, who was Shana's housemate, said, quote, "A few weeks before she died, she said to me that no one believed her. But it did happen, and because of the history of everything, it just looked like she was lying." I can't imagine how helpless Shana is feeling right now. The police won't help her and even find her for wasting their time. And I feel so sorry for her. It's awful. So in July of 2016, Shana called 999, which is the equivalent of 911, at 6:48 a.m. to tell them that 1 hour earlier she had become aware of someone in her room watching her as she slept, and that she had pulled the covers over her head to try and be as quiet and still as possible until they left, and that they had used a stolen key to break in. Once she was sure they were gone, she looked out her window to see Michael walking away.
Just don't do it again. And if you come near the house again,
I won't come near the house again. I won't contact you again. Okay?
I think that's best.
Shana Grice recorded this telephone conversation with her boyfriend in July 2016. It was a desperate attempt to prove to police that Michael Lane was stalking her.
Why did you take the key in the first place?
I wanted to see you and probably talk to you, and I knew you wouldn't let me in otherwise.
So because he used a stolen key, the police charged him with theft and said they had been considering a stalking or harassment charge. But since they didn't have any proof, and they only had proof of theft because he had a stolen key, they decided to charge him with theft since they could prove it. more than they could prove stalking or harassment. Which again, this makes me so angry because a stalking or harassment charge would have been much heftier than just theft. So eventually Shana begins relying on her friends and family because she knows the cops aren't going to help her. So she tells them if they had not heard from her in a few hours that they needed to call on her and check on her. So over the following days, Shana actually contacted the police 2 more times about calls from a withheld number. And one said she heard heavy breathing, and the other was linked to Michael's number. In August, after Shana finally ended things with Michael, he told a friend that he was depressed over Shana ending things, and he said that she would pay for what she's done. On August 25th, 2016, Michael went to Shana's house after she was home alone, let himself in, slit her throat, set fire to the bedroom, and her body was found by Ian Cook, which was Ashley's father, at her home in Christory Road in East Sussex. Right away, they knew that it was Michael that had done this. I mean, who else could have done this? The police arrested him the same day at his work in Burgess Hill. And initially, he had lied to the police about what he had done that day before finally admitting that he had gone to Shauna's house. He claimed that he had gone there and found the front door unlocked, or found the front door open, and then found Shauna's body in her bedroom. He claimed that he then panicked and left the scene without calling 999. Not only did he leave the scene without calling 999, but he left the scene without calling the police, without checking her vital signs, or telling his family what he had found. Which, I don't know about y'all, but if I walk into anyone that I know, even if we're not that close, if I walk into anyone I know's house and find them laying on the floor with their throat slit, I'm calling the police. And I'm definitely checking to see if there are any if there's any vital signs. I'm at least gonna hold my finger under their nose, see if I can feel them breathing. I'm not just gonna leave without calling the police. He claimed that he had only kept quiet about what he had seen because he was afraid of being accused of her murder. So the trial lasted 2 weeks in Lewes Crown Court. Am I saying that right? Lewes Crown Court. And they obviously found Michael guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The life imprisonment term came with a minimum of 25 years, and after the trial, a minimum of 12 women came forward about this pattern of behavior from Michael.
Didn't really speak to him at all, which again was normal, but he then became quite close and friendly at our camps that we went to. Not just with me, but with other people as well, which again was normal, but it was a lot more forward than what I would have expected someone at a girl guide helper to be. When I was at school, my school was sort of 2-minute walk from my house, and his dad lived on the same road, so I always used to see him driving around, whether he was visiting his dad, or I think he worked in the area as well, but he'd always drive past and ask if I need a lift home from school, knowing that I lived a 2-minute walk from school. I did refuse it every time, because of the times that he offered me a lift home from school, and I'd say, I'd sort of act as if it was making me feel uncomfortable. So I think he was aware that he did make me feel like that. And he did apologise to me in the pub and say I never meant to come across like a strange person. I was just being friendly. But I did my best to sort of make my boyfriend aware at the time of what had happened.
The apology did little to calm Ellie, and the following social media messages, which started out neutral and innocent, quickly added further concern.
He would send me messages sort of, about my relationship that I was in, saying that I shouldn't be with that person and that I should be with him. So at that point, I thought that was weird, so I blocked him on Facebook. But then at the time, there was an app which was called Snapchat, which is send pictures and they only last for 10 seconds, you can't keep them. So he would then send me messages on that, because I don't know whether he knew that I couldn't keep them, and whether it was a case of, she's going to look at the message and then she can't ever see it again. But he'd send me pictures of my bedroom window, as if he's, sitting outside my house, and he'd send me a picture and say, "I can see you." And I'd look out my window and he'd be there and sat outside in his van.
How did you feel when you saw that?
Uncomfortable. Yeah, I shut all my blinds, I'd make sure all my doors were locked. One of the messages I did get from Mike was asking me if I'd stay in a hotel with him for a night, if he booked a room, and he paid me £500, that if I would let him do what he wanted to do to me, which was probably one of the most scariest messages I'd had from him, because if I'd have gone and met him, I don't know what could have happened.
Ellie spoke up when a friend alerted her to the newspaper articles, and her opinion on the case and its overall ramifications is clear.
Going from what I've heard, I would say that Shana was 110% stalked, and the police should have, even her coming forward and saying even the smallest little thing, Shana probably would have had messages on her phone. I did see a few things in the paper that I thought that the police should definitely have not ignored.
So obviously this is not the first time that Michael has done this. It also came out that Michael had actually groomed a 14-year-old girl and was never charged with that. And here's where it gets even grosser. It turns out he had actually went to scout events to try and gain access to children. And it also came out that he had treated other women that he was in relationships with the same as he had treated Shana, loitering outside their homes, sending them explicit messages, pestering women to sleep with him for money. There was also sexual assault of another woman and harassing of 2 women that he met in a pub. So just all around disgusting behavior from this guy. So Shauna's parents have actually come out and said that Shana would still be alive if Sussex police had actually done their job. And I agree with them. Judge Justice Green also criticized the police by saying, quote, "You jump to conclusions. She was treated as the wrongdoer and having committed a criminal offense, and Michael was treated as the victim. There was seemingly no appreciation on the part of those investigating that a young woman in a sexual relationship with a man could at one and the same time be vulnerable and at risk of serious harm." I don't know who this man is, but I love him. He hit the nail on the head. Just because you are in a relationship with someone, whether it is a romantic relationship, a sexual relationship, or even a platonic relationship, it does not give them the right to hurt you. It does not give them the right to kill you. Following the murder trial, there was actually a 2-year-long investigation on how the police handled the case. In late April of 2017, the Sussex Police Department actually accepted 6 recommendations from the IPCC to improve the way that the force dealt with stalking. The recommendations concerned training, data systems, and making use of relevant information. IPCC Commissioner Tom Milsom said that the Sussex Police Department had actually taken a positive response to these recommendations and said, quote, "Stalking and harassment are serious offenses, and in certain situations such as those involving Shana can have tragic consequences." And Detective Superintendent Jason Tingley of the Sussex Police said that they were actually taking on additional training and said that they have a better understanding of what stalking is and how to handle cases involving stalking. However, in April of 2019, a report by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. These words that I can't say. Her Majesty's Inspectorate and Constabulary. I'm sorry, that's a funny word. Constabulary. Constabulary. Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services actually concluded that stalking and harassment charges were still not being taken seriously by the Sussex police, and that these training programs had never been completed. And surprise, surprise, they also determined that most investigating officers had received no training, so police officers were receiving no training. What a surprise there. They also said that not enough victims were being referred to support services, and there was virtually no support for victims of online stalking. They also said that police forces nationally were not using their powers under stalking laws to search suspects' homes, which made investigations less thorough. Injunctions were also not being used, so victims were being less protected. Injunctions were also not being properly used, so the victims were not being protected as they should be. The National Police Chief Council was called upon to make sure that police forces around the UK made improvements, so that way there was a single definition of stalking that was being followed by police around the country. In April of 2019, it was also announced that 3 officers would face disciplinary action the following May. 2 officers, one retired, faced gross misconduct proceedings, while another was accused of just regular misconduct. Police Chief John Barry Mills actually resigned from the force before the hearings on May 10th of 2019. One of these allegations against John Barry Mills is that he failed to adequately investigate the charges of stalking and harassment whenever Shana had reported that Michael had broken into her home to watch her sleep. Shana had actually made a further complaint on July 12th when Michael followed her home in his car, but Mills actually failed to give Shana any kind of update regarding the situation. She was not called back, and a few days later she received a letter in the mail saying that the case was closed. Shana's friends said that she was angry about this whole situation, rightfully so. She said that she could not believe that police just closed the case, and because of this, she actually didn't report any further instances of stalking because she just felt really discouraged. And this was the last time that she reported any stalking before she was murdered by Michael. So when he was questioned about this, Mills said that Michael's behavior alarmed him, and he admits that this was an oversight by him, which your oversight led to a young woman being murdered, but okay. An oversight is like missing a spot on the floor whenever you're cleaning the floor at work. An oversight is forgetting to file away a paper at work. An oversight is not closing a case of stalking whenever this guy has a history of dangerous behavior. So the Independent Office for Police Conduct, which was formed in 2018 and took over some of the IPCC's functions, actually stated that resigning from the force does not preclude officers from facing misconduct hearings. So this disciplinary panel ruled that PC Mills's actions had amounted to gross misconduct, and had he not already resigned, he would have been dismissed from the force. Shana's parents said that Shana paid for lack of police training and lack of care with her life. Her parents also requested a full and focused inquiry, and the High Court ruled that the independent investigation was fair and that it was accurate. In December, they said that previous investigations established relevant facts. And that is the horrifying case of Shana Grice, who would still be here if not for the police and their just uncaring attitudes and their lack of training. And everything about this case makes me angry. From the fact that, like her parents said, Shana paid for the lack of police training with her own life. She did everything right. She contacted the police every single time that there was an incident with Michael. She contacted the police to make a record. And at one point she was even met with them fining her, with them charging her and Michael getting to walk free. How is that fair? She did everything that victims are told they're supposed to do, and she got penalized for it, first of all, and she ended up getting murdered as a result of it. It's a sad situation, but it also makes me incredibly angry because, we're told that if we're ever a victim of anything like this, this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we're supposed to handle it. And Shana did everything that we're supposed to do, and it ended up not even mattering in the end. Shana should still be here today, and I'm glad that Michael got punishment for it. But it doesn't bring Shana back. Nothing will ever bring Shana back. Her parents have lost a child. Her friends have lost a beautiful young woman. A caring, bright, young light that is just gone in the world. And it's not fair. And that's what I have for y'all today. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.